In the heart of a vibrant European city, where history whispered through ancient cobblestone streets and grand architecture stood tall against the sky, tourists from all corners of the world gathered to admire its most iconic landmark, the Royal Palace. The palace was not just a symbol of power, but also an embodiment of tradition, guarded day and night by the elite royal guard. These guards were known for their impeccable discipline, sharp uniforms, and majestic horses that trotted alongside them with grace and authority. Among the sea of visitors stood Clara Whitmore, a woman whose presence demanded attention, not always for the right reasons. Clara was no ordinary tourist. She came from wealth, flaunted it unapologetically, and carried herself as if the world existed solely to cater to her whims. Her Instagram profile was a testament to her lifestyle, filled with glamorous photos taken in places where cameras weren't allowed, captions dripping with arrogance, and comments boasting about bending rules. To Clara, boundaries were mere suggestions, and consequences were for other people. On this sunny afternoon, Clara strolled toward the palace gates, her designer sunglasses perched atop her head, and her phone clutched tightly in one hand. She had already decided that today's highlight would be a selfie with the mounted guards, a photo guaranteed to rack up likes and envy-filled comments. As she approached the scene, her eyes landed on Sir Galahad, the most striking horse among the guards. His coat gleamed under the sunlight, his mane perfectly groomed, and his stance exuded both strength and elegance. Beside him sat Captain James Hawthorne, a man whose stern expression matched the seriousness of his role. Clara wasted no time positioning herself near Sir Galahad, completely ignoring the signs warning visitors to maintain a safe distance. A nearby guard politely reminded her of the rules, but Clara brushed him off with a dismissive wave. "It's just a picture," she said loudly enough for those around her to hear. "What's the harm?" She raised her phone, snapping shots without permission, while muttering complaints about how boring the guards looked standing there all day. Captain Hawthorne, who had been observing her behavior silently, finally intervened. With calm yet firm authority, he stepped forward. "Ma'am," he began, his voice steady and respectful, "I must ask you to step back. This area is restricted for your safety and ours." Clara turned to face him, her lips curling into a sneer. "Oh, please," she retorted, rolling her eyes dramatically. "You're telling me I can't even take a selfie? What is this, some kind of dictatorship?" Her tone drew curious glances from bystanders, some amused, others annoyed. But what happened next caught everyone, including Clara, off guard. Sir Galahad, seemingly unimpressed by her attitude, let out a loud snort and stomped his hoof against the ground. It wasn't aggressive, but it was enough to startle Clara, causing her to fumble and drop her phone. The device clattered onto the hard stones, narrowly avoiding damage. For a moment, silence hung in the air as Clara stared at the horse, her cheeks flushing red with embarrassment. Instead of apologizing or stepping away, Clara straightened up, her pride wounded. "See what your horse did." She snapped at Captain Hawthorne, pointing accusingly at Sir Galahad. "He almost broke my phone." James met her gaze evenly, unfazed by her outburst. "Sir Galahad is highly trained and sensitive to energy," he replied calmly. "Perhaps if you respected the rules, such incidents could be avoided." The crowd murmured quietly, some nodding in agreement, others stifling laughter. Clara huffed, retrieving her phone and storming off, muttering under her breath about how ridiculous the whole situation was. Little did she know, this encounter was only the beginning of a lesson she wouldn't soon forget, one taught not by the guards, but by the very horse she had dismissed so carelessly. Weeks passed, and Clara's life began to shift in ways she hadn't anticipated. The days spent at the stables under Lady Eleanor's watchful eye had left an indelible mark on her. For the first time in years, Clara found herself waking up with a sense of purpose, not to chase likes on social media or flaunt her wealth, but to learn something meaningful. She started visiting the stables regularly, even after her volunteer stint ended, eager to deepen her understanding of the horses and their world. At first, Captain Hawthorne was skeptical. He'd heard about Clara's transformation from Eleanor, but he remained cautious, unsure if her change of heart was genuine. Sir Galahad, however, seemed less guarded. Over time, Clara noticed how the horse responded to her presence differently now. Where once he had been wary, almost dismissive, he now greeted her with a soft nicker, allowing her to approach without hesitation. It was as if he recognized her efforts and was offering his approval, one small gesture at a time. One crisp morning, as Clara worked alongside Eleanor, grooming Sir Galahad and preparing him for the day, James approached them. "Clara," he said, his tone polite but measured, "Eleanor has told me a lot about your progress. I must admit, I wasn't sure what to expect when this started." Clara looked up, meeting his gaze. Gone was the defensiveness that used to flare whenever someone challenged her. Instead, she offered a small, self-deprecating smile. "To be honest, neither did I," she admitted. "But working here, it's changed the way I see things. Not just horses, but people too, including myself." James nodded, appearing genuinely impressed. After a moment, he added, "Sir Galahad is no ordinary horse. He has a way of bringing out the best, or the worst, in people. You've earned his trust, and that says a lot." Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. Earning Sir Galahad's trust meant more to her than any Instagram follower or luxury purchase ever had. She reached out to pat the horse's neck, murmuring a quiet thank you. In return, Sir Galahad pressed his velvety nose against her shoulder, sealing the bond they'd built together. As weeks turned into months, Clara continued to visit the stables, eventually taking on more responsibilities. She learned to ride, not the flashy, showy style she'd imagined, but the disciplined, respectful approach required by the Royal Guard standards. Under Eleanor's guidance, she mastered basic commands, practiced patience during training sessions, and developed a keen awareness of the horse's needs. Each milestone brought its own reward. A flick of Sir Galahad's tail, a proud nod from Eleanor, or a rare smile from James. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed outside the stables either. Friends and acquaintances who had grown accustomed to Clara's entitled behavior began commenting on how much she'd changed. Some were skeptical at first, assuming it was another fleeting phase, but others saw the sincerity in her actions. When Clara posted a photo online of herself covered in hay, grinning ear to ear beside Sir Galahad, the caption read simply, "Hard work teaches you more than comfort ever will." The post went viral, not because of its glamour, but because of its honesty. One afternoon, as Clara stood beside Sir Galahad, reflecting on how far she'd come, Eleanor joined her. "You know," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "horses have a way of showing us who we really are. They don't care about titles, money, or appearances. All they want is respect and kindness." Clara nodded, her eyes misting slightly. "I think Sir Galahad knew exactly who I was the moment I walked into the stables," she replied. "And somehow, despite everything, he gave me a chance to prove I could be better." Eleanor smiled, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder. "That's because he saw potential in you, just like we all do." In that moment, Clara realized something profound. The lessons she'd learned weren't just about horses or humility. They were about connection, about finding value in effort rather than entitlement, and discovering strength in vulnerability. Sir Galahad, with his quiet wisdom and unwavering grace, had been more than a teacher. He had been a mirror, reflecting both her flaws and her capacity for growth. Though Clara still had moments of doubt, she knew one thing for certain. She would never forget the lesson Sir Galahad had taught her, and deep down, she hoped he knew just how grateful she was. The following morning, Clara woke up with a mix of emotions, anger, embarrassment, and an unshakable determination to prove herself right. She couldn't let Lady Eleanor or Captain Hawthorne have the last word. In her mind, they had ganged up on her, making her look foolish when all she'd wanted was to teach Sir Galahad a lesson. But now, more than ever, Clara felt a burning need to show them that she wasn't someone who could be pushed around. If anything, their interference only fueled her resolve. Clara decided to return to the palace square one final time. This time, she would make sure no one stopped her. She arrived earlier than usual, before the guards began their patrol, hoping to catch Sir Galahad off guard. Her plan was simple: get close enough to startle him in front of everyone, exposing his supposed high-strung nature for what it really was. After all, if he bolted or acted out, wouldn't that prove her point? It would embarrass Captain Hawthorne and show the world that these so-called elite horses weren't as perfect as people thought. As the crowd began to gather, the mounted guards appeared, trotting gracefully into position outside the palace gates. Clara's eyes immediately locked onto Sir Galahad, who stood tall and proud beside Captain Hawthorne. To her frustration, the horse seemed completely unfazed by her presence, his calm demeanor almost mocking her. Determined not to back down, Clara edged closer, ignoring the warning glances from nearby guards. When she was within arm's reach, Clara made her move. With a dramatic flourish, she reached toward Sir Galahad, waving her arms wildly and making loud, sharp noises in an attempt to spook him. The reaction she expected, a panicked leap or a frightened whinny, never came. Instead, Sir Galahad turned his head slowly, fixing her with a steady gaze that sent chills down her spine. For a moment, Clara hesitated, unnerved by the intensity in his eyes. But then, without warning, the horse reared up slightly, letting out a powerful snort. The crowd gasped, some stepping back instinctively, while others whipped out their phones to capture the scene. Clara stumbled backward, losing her balance and landing hard in a puddle left over from the previous night's rain. Mud splattered across her expensive clothes, ruining her pristine appearance. As she sat there, drenched and humiliated, she became acutely aware of the laughter rippling through the crowd. People whispered behind their hands, pointing at her predicament, and Clara felt her cheeks burn with shame. Captain Hawthorne dismounted quickly, approaching Clara with a mixture of concern and exasperation. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, offering her a hand to help her up. But Clara slapped it away, scrambling to her feet on her own. "This is your fault," she snapped, glaring at both James and Sir Galahad. "Your horse attacked me." James raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by her accusation. "Sir Galahad reacted to your aggressive behavior," he said calmly. "Had you respected the rules and kept your distance, this wouldn't have happened." Clara opened her mouth to argue but stopped short when she noticed something unusual. Sir Galahad, despite the commotion, had settled back into his usual composed stance. There was no sign of fear or aggression in him, only quiet confidence. Even worse, the crowd didn't seem to pity her. Instead, many looked amused, even relieved to see someone like Clara taken down a peg. Furious and desperate to save face, Clara pointed a finger at James. "You planned this," she accused. "You and that horse are trying to ruin my vacation." But her words fell flat, drowned out by the murmur of the crowd and the undeniable truth in James's expression. He hadn't planned anything. Clara's own actions had led to this moment. Defeated and dripping with mud, Clara stormed off, muttering under her breath about how unfair everything was. What she failed to realize, however, was that Sir Galahad's reaction hadn't been random. The horse, known for his intelligence and sensitivity, had responded not out of malice, but as a reflection of her behavior. And though Clara refused to admit it, the incident marked the beginning of a shift, a crack in the armor of her entitled worldview. Unbeknownst to her, Lady Eleanor had witnessed the entire scene from a distance. Watching Clara slink away, Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes, she murmured to herself, "The best lessons come when we least expect them." Little did Clara know, this wasn't the end of her journey. It was only the beginning of a transformation she couldn't yet see coming. Months had passed since Clara's fateful encounter with Sir Galahad, and the changes in her life were undeniable. The once entitled socialite who breezed through rules and expected the world to cater to her whims was now a different person altogether. Her days no longer revolved around chasing superficial validation on social media or indulging in reckless behavior. Instead, she found joy in the simple, grounding routines of caring for horses, feeding them, grooming them, and learning their unique personalities. But perhaps the most profound change was within herself. Clara had begun to see the value of humility, hard work, and genuine connection. One crisp autumn morning, Clara decided to return to the palace square, not as a tourist snapping selfies or causing trouble, but as someone seeking closure. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, she carried a bouquet of wildflowers, their vibrant colors matching the warmth she felt in her heart. She walked with purpose, her steps steady and confident yet tinged with nervousness. This visit wasn't just about gratitude, it was about making amends. When she arrived, Captain Hawthorne and Lady Eleanor were overseeing the mounted guards near the palace gates. Clara approached them slowly, aware of how much she owed these two individuals who had guided her through her transformation. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying sincerity that hadn't been there before. "I wanted to thank you both for everything." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the gesture, while James studied her carefully, searching for any trace of the woman she used to be. Finding none, he nodded approvingly. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong," he said. "You've come a long way, Clara." Clara smiled faintly, handing the bouquet to Eleanor. "These are for you, and for Sir Galahad," she added, glancing at the horse standing nearby. Sir Galahad watched her quietly, his dark eyes reflecting wisdom far beyond words. Clara knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his neck. "I owe you an apology," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I treated you horribly when we first met. I didn't understand you or respect you the way I should have. Thank you for teaching me patience, kindness, and humility." For a moment, the square fell silent, save for the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then, as if accepting her apology, Sir Galahad lowered his head slightly, nudging her shoulder in a gesture of forgiveness. Clara blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the depth of the bond they had formed. It wasn't just a horse she had learned from. It was a mirror reflecting her own flaws and potential. The crowd gathered around began to notice the scene unfolding before them. Some recorded it on their phones, moved by the sincerity of the moment, while others simply observed, touched by the humanity of it all. Clara stood up, addressing Eleanor and James directly. "I know I can't undo what I did in the past," she continued, "but I want to make sure I don't repeat those mistakes. That's why I'd like to share my story, if you'll let me." Intrigued, James asked, "What do you mean?" Clara explained her idea: to use her platform on social media to spread awareness about responsible tourism, animal care, and the importance of respecting boundaries. "So many people act like I used to, entitled, careless, and dismissive of rules," she admitted. "If sharing my experience helps even one person think twice before acting selfishly, then maybe all of this will have been worth it." Eleanor and James exchanged a glance, both visibly impressed by her commitment. "That's a noble goal," Eleanor said, smiling warmly, "and we'd be honored to support you however we can." With their blessing, Clara posted a heartfelt message online later that day. Alongside photos of herself working in the stables and bonding with Sir Galahad, she wrote candidly about her journey, from her embarrassing antics at the palace square to the lessons she had learned about humility and respect. The post resonated deeply with her followers, sparking conversations about personal growth, accountability, and kindness toward animals. As weeks turned into months, Clara dedicated herself to volunteering at local stables, organizing workshops for tourists visiting the palace, and advocating for ethical treatment of animals. Her transformation became a beacon of hope for others struggling to break free from toxic habits or entitled mindsets. And though she still faced challenges along the way, Clara knew she would never forget the lesson Sir Galahad had taught her. Sometimes, the greatest teacher isn't a person. It's a horse whose quiet strength reminds us of our own capacity for change. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a golden glow over the palace grounds. Clara sat alone in her hotel room, stewing in frustration. She replayed the day's events in her mind, each memory fueling her anger. How dare Captain Hawthorne lecture her like she was some misbehaving child? And that horse, Sir Galahad, what gave him the right to act so smug? Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they had humiliated her, even if no one else seemed to notice. In her mind, the entire world was against her. But Clara wasn't the kind of person to let things go. If anything, setbacks only made her more determined. As she scrolled through photos on her phone, she came across an idea. Earlier that week, she'd seen a video online where someone pranked a horse by feeding it carrots laced with chili powder. The horse hadn't been harmed, but the prankster claimed it had taught the animal a lesson. Clara grinned, a plan forming in her head. This time, she wouldn't just spook Sir Galahad. She'd embarrass him, and his rider, in front of everyone. The next morning, Clara woke up early, slipping out of her hotel before the city fully awakened. She stopped at a local market to buy carrots and a small packet of chili powder, careful to avoid drawing attention. By the time she reached the palace stables, the air was cool and quiet, save for the occasional whinny or shuffle of hooves. Clara knew the guards weren't stationed here overnight, which meant the horses were left unattended until their handlers arrived. It was the perfect opportunity. Creeping closer to the stable doors, Clara felt a thrill of excitement mixed with nervousness. She had never done anything quite like this before, but the thought of getting back at Sir Galahad pushed her forward. Inside, the stables were dimly lit, the scent of hay and leather filling the air. Rows of stalls lined either side, each occupied by a magnificent horse. Clara scanned the names on the gates until she found what she was looking for. Sir Galahad. Her heart raced as she approached his stall. Sir Galahad stood quietly, his ears flicking at the sound of her footsteps. For a moment, Clara hesitated. Up close, he looked even more imposing than she remembered, his dark eyes watching her every move. But she quickly shook off the unease, reminding herself why she was there. Pulling out the carrots and chili powder, she began coating them carefully, her hands trembling slightly. Just as she finished preparing the first carrot, a voice cut through the silence. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Clara froze, her blood running cold. Turning slowly, she saw an older woman standing in the doorway, her arms crossed and her expression stern. Dressed in practical boots and a weathered jacket, the woman exuded authority. This was Lady Eleanor, a retired royal trainer who still visited the stables daily to check on the horses. Though she no longer worked directly with the guards, her presence commanded respect from everyone who knew her. I was just... Clara stammered, caught completely off guard. Her mind scrambled for an excuse, but none came. Eleanor stepped closer, her sharp eyes narrowing, as she spotted the chili-coated carrots in Clara's hand. Without a word, she snatched them away, examining them closely. When she looked back at Clara, her gaze was icy. "Do you have any idea how dangerous this is?" Eleanor asked, her tone leaving no room for argument. "These animals are highly trained and sensitive. Something like this could harm them, or worse." Clara opened her mouth to defend herself, but Eleanor held up a hand, silencing her. "I don't care who you are or what your intentions are," she continued. "If I catch you near these horses again without permission, I'll make sure the authorities know about it. Do I make myself clear?" Humiliated and furious, Clara nodded stiffly, her face burning with shame. She wanted to argue, to explain that she was only trying to teach Sir Galahad a lesson, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the stables, muttering under her breath about how unfair everything was. As she walked away, Eleanor watched her go, shaking her head. Then, turning to Sir Galahad, she patted his neck gently. "Don't worry, boy," she said softly. "Some people need a little extra help learning their lessons." Unbeknownst to Clara, her actions hadn't gone unnoticed. Not only had Eleanor intervened, but word of the incident quickly spread among the palace staff. Clara might have thought she was clever, but karma was already setting its gears in motion, and Sir Galahad, ever perceptive, seemed to sense that justice would soon be served. The next day, Clara sat in her hotel room, replaying the events of the previous morning over and over in her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about the way the crowd had laughed at her, the mud staining her designer clothes, and most humiliating of all, the calm, almost knowing look in Sir Galahad's eyes as he reared up. It wasn't just embarrassment that gnawed at her. It was something deeper, a nagging feeling she couldn't quite put into words. For the first time in her life, Clara felt small, vulnerable, and she hated every second of it. Determined to reclaim some semblance of control, Clara drafted an angry email to the palace administration, accusing Captain Hawthorne and Sir Galahad of deliberately trying to humiliate her. She even considered filing a formal complaint, convinced that this would force them to apologize and make amends. But as she typed out her grievances, something unexpected happened. Doubt crept in. Deep down, Clara knew she hadn't exactly been innocent. Her actions had been reckless, disrespectful, and selfish. The thought made her pause, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. Before she could hit send, there was a knock at her door. Startled, Clara opened it to find Lady Eleanor standing there, holding a basket filled with fresh apples and carrots. "Good morning," Eleanor said warmly, though her tone carried an edge of authority. "May I come in?" Clara hesitated, unsure why Eleanor would show up unannounced, but curiosity got the better of her. She stepped aside, allowing the older woman to enter. Once inside, Eleanor placed the basket on the table and turned to face Clara. "I heard about what happened yesterday," she began, cutting straight to the point. "And I have a proposal for you." "A proposal?" Clara repeated skeptically, crossing her arms. "What kind of proposal?" Eleanor smiled faintly, her gaze steady. "Instead of filing complaints or trying to punish Sir Galahad, why not spend some time getting to know him? Volunteer at the stables for a few days under my supervision. Learn how to care for horses, understand their behavior, and maybe, just maybe, you'll see things from a different perspective." Clara stared at her, incredulous. "You want me to work in the stables? Are you serious?" "I'm very serious," Eleanor replied, her voice firm but kind. "It won't cost you anything except your time and effort. And who knows, you might learn something valuable, not just about horses, but about yourself." For a moment, Clara considered refusing outright. The idea of mucking out stalls or grooming animals seemed beneath her, a waste of her precious time. But then she remembered the laughter of the crowd, the smug looks from Captain Hawthorne, and the haunting intelligence in Sir Galahad's eyes. If nothing else, volunteering might give her leverage later, proof that she'd tried to cooperate before taking further action. With a reluctant sigh, she agreed. The next morning, Clara arrived at the stables, dressed in borrowed boots and jeans that already felt too tight. Eleanor greeted her with a clipboard and a list of tasks: cleaning stalls, feeding the horses, brushing their coats, and learning basic commands. Clara groaned inwardly but followed instructions, determined to get through it as quickly as possible. At first, everything felt foreign and frustrating. The smell of hay and manure overwhelmed her senses, and the physical labor left her hands sore and blistered. Every task seemed designed to test her patience. But as the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. Slowly, Clara started noticing details she'd overlooked before. The soft nicker of a horse greeting its handler, the rhythmic swish of a tail, the trust reflected in wide, gentle eyes. One afternoon, while grooming Sir Galahad, Clara found herself pausing to run her hand along his sleek coat. He leaned into her touch, exhaling softly, and for the first time, Clara felt a connection, a flicker of understanding that went beyond words. By the end of the week, Clara had transformed, not completely, but enough to surprise even herself. She still cringed at the dirt under her nails and the sweat on her brow, but she also felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in years. More importantly, she began to see Sir Galahad not as an adversary, but as a teacher, one who had shown her the value of respect, humility, and hard work. When Eleanor approached her on the final day, Clara surprised them both by saying, "Thank you for everything." It wasn't much, but it was a start, a step toward becoming someone new, someone better. And though she didn't realize it yet, this journey was far from over. The next morning, Clara returned to the palace square, her ego bruised, but far from shattered. She couldn't let a horse, or its rider, get the better of her. To Clara, this wasn't just about a dropped phone or a minor scolding. It was a matter of principle. How dare they treat her like an ordinary tourist? She was Clara Whitmore, someone who had never been told no in her life. And so, fueled by indignation and a desire for revenge, she decided to prove a point. Clara arrived earlier than usual, timing her visit to coincide with the changing of the guard. The crowd was thinner now, giving her more freedom to move unnoticed. Her plan was simple: spook Sir Galahad, humiliate Captain Hawthorne, and walk away victorious. She carried a small compact mirror in her purse, the kind used for touch-ups, but today it served a different purpose. As the guards took their positions outside the palace gates, Clara lingered nearby, pretending to admire the architecture while keeping one eye on Sir Galahad. When the moment seemed right, she discreetly pulled out the mirror and angled it toward the sun. A bright beam of light reflected off the surface, darting across the cobblestones before landing squarely on Sir Galahad's face. The horse blinked rapidly, clearly unsettled by the sudden glare. Clara smirked, feeling a surge of satisfaction. But her victory was short-lived. Captain Hawthorne noticed immediately. His sharp eyes scanned the area until they landed on Clara, standing a few feet away with the mirror still in hand. "Ma'am," James called out, his voice firm and authoritative. "What are you doing?" Clara froze, caught red-handed, but her pride wouldn't let her admit guilt. Instead, she feigned innocence, lowering the mirror as if surprised by his question. "What do you mean?" she asked sweetly, batting her eyelashes. "I'm just enjoying the view." James didn't buy it for a second. He dismounted smoothly, his boots clicking against the stones as he approached her. "That mirror is distracting my horse," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If you continue, you're putting yourself and others at risk." Clara bristled at his words, her temper flaring once again. "Oh, come on," she shot back, her voice rising. "It's just a little light. Are you saying your precious horse can't handle it?" Her mocking tone drew a few stares from passers-by, some amused by her audacity, others irritated by her blatant disregard for rules. James remained calm, though his jaw tightened slightly, a subtle sign of frustration. "Sir Galahad is trained to respond to threats," he explained patiently. "Bright flashes like that could startle him, causing him to bolt. If that happens, someone could get hurt, including you." But Clara wasn't listening. Her mind was too busy crafting insults and justifications. "Well, maybe if your horse wasn't so high-strung, we wouldn't have this problem," she retorted, folding her arms across her chest. "Honestly, I don't see why everyone makes such a big deal about him. He's just a horse." The comment struck a nerve, not just with James, but with the other guards and even some tourists who overheard. Sir Galahad wasn't just a horse. He was part of an elite unit, meticulously trained and deeply respected. To dismiss him so casually felt like an insult to everyone present. James took a deep breath, reining in his emotions. "Respect isn't something you demand, ma'am," he said evenly. "It's earned. Perhaps if you showed some, you'd understand why Sir Galahad deserves it." Clara rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed. "Whatever," she muttered, slipping the mirror back into her purse. But as she turned to leave, she paused, glancing over her shoulder at Sir Galahad. There was something in the horse's gaze, calm yet piercing, that made her uneasy. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if there was more to him than met the eye. Was he really as intelligent as people claimed? Could he sense her hostility? Shaking off the thought, Clara walked away, muttering under her breath about how ridiculous the whole situation was. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. What if Sir Galahad wasn't just reacting to the mirror? What if he saw through her bravado, sensing the insecurity beneath? These questions gnawed at her, though she refused to acknowledge them openly. Instead, she vowed silently to teach the horse and his rider a lesson they wouldn't forget. Little did Clara know, her actions were setting off a chain reaction, one that would force her to confront not only the consequences of her behavior, but also the person she had become. And Sir Galahad, with his quiet wisdom and unwavering dignity, was ready to play his part in teaching her that lesson. As the seasons changed and winter gave way to spring, Clara's life continued to blossom in ways she never thought possible. The woman who had once been defined by her arrogance and disregard for others was now known for her compassion, dedication, and willingness to learn. People around her, friends, acquaintances, even strangers, were inspired by her transformation. What started as a personal journey of redemption had grown into something larger, a mission to inspire others to reflect on their actions and strive to be better. Clara often returned to the palace stables, not out of obligation, but because they had become a second home to her. Sir Galahad, now older and slower in his movements, still held a special place in her heart. On quiet afternoons, she would sit beside him, brushing his coat, or simply talking about her day. Though he couldn't respond with words, his calm presence spoke volumes. It reminded her of how far she'd come, and how much she owed to the horse who had unknowingly guided her toward change. One sunny morning, Clara arrived at the stables carrying a small gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a custom-made halter embroidered with Sir Galahad's name and a quote that summed up everything he had taught her. "Strength lies not in force, but in understanding." She presented it to Captain Hawthorne and Lady Eleanor, explaining that she wanted Sir Galahad to wear it during ceremonial events. "It's my way of honoring him," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "He may not realize it, but he changed my life." James accepted the gift graciously, visibly moved by her gesture. "Sir Galahad has touched many lives," he said, glancing fondly at the horse. "But I think you've given him something too, a reminder that even those who seem impossible to reach can find their way." Eleanor nodded in agreement, adding, "And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. Change is always possible, if we're open to it." Over time, Clara expanded her efforts beyond the palace grounds. She began volunteering at animal shelters, organizing community programs to educate children about caring for animals, and speaking at schools about the importance of respect and responsibility. Her Instagram feed, once dominated by selfies and boastful captions, was now a platform for positivity and advocacy. Photos of her working with horses, planting trees, or helping at local charities replaced the old posts, earning her praise from followers worldwide. Her story reached people from all walks of life, sparking conversations about humility, growth, and the power of second chances. Tourists visiting the palace often approached her, sharing how her posts had encouraged them to rethink their behavior while traveling. One young girl, clutching a stuffed horse, shyly asked Clara if she could meet Sir Galahad. Touched by the request, Clara arranged for the girl to visit the stables, where she introduced her to the majestic horse. Watching the child's eyes light up with wonder reminded Clara of her own awe when she first truly connected with Sir Galahad. Though her life had taken on new meaning, Clara never forgot the pivotal moments that shaped her journey. Whenever she faced doubt or challenges, she remembered the lessons she had learned, not just from Sir Galahad, but from James, Eleanor, and the countless individuals who had supported her along the way. Their patience and guidance had shown her that true strength comes from vulnerability, and real growth stems from accountability. Years later, when Clara stood before a crowd at a charity gala dedicated to animal welfare, she reflected on her past with neither shame nor regret. Instead, she saw it as the foundation of her present, a reminder of how far she had come and how much farther she could go. As she delivered her speech, Her gaze landed on Sir Galahad, now retired and grazing peacefully in a nearby paddock. His coat no longer gleamed as brightly as it once did, but his spirit remained unbroken. "I owe so much to this incredible horse," Clara said, her voice steady yet emotional. "He didn't judge me for my mistakes. Instead, he showed me the value of kindness, patience, and humility. He taught me that every action has consequences, but also that every mistake is an opportunity to grow." The audience erupted into applause, but Clara barely noticed. Her focus was on Sir Galahad, whose ears flicked toward the sound as if acknowledging the praise. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and Clara felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Without words, she silently thanked him for teaching her the hardest lesson of her life, and for showing her that redemption wasn't just possible, it was beautiful. And so, Clara Whitmore's story became one of hope and transformation, a testament to the idea that no matter where we start, we have the power to rewrite our endings. All it takes is a little courage, a lot of humility, and sometimes the gentle nudge of a wise old